Oh, happy day. Woo! Oh, happy day. I knew I was singing this morning for a reason. Probably won't mean a lot or much to a lot of you, but Chris Dawson has just today been found guilty of murdering his wife, Lynn, back in 1982 in New South Wales, Australia. And it's really fucking exciting because there was an award-winning podcast called Teacher's Pet, which actually led to him being arrested and charged after 36 years. Oh, it's awesome, Melmo. Hello. Yep, guilty. After 5.5 hours it took the judge to hand down the judgment, and luckily I had a friend who was listening in because obviously work was pretty full on my priority, but the little snippets I got to catch up on lunchtime, I was thinking, oh, is he going? Initially, I thought, oh, this is going to be a guilty verdict, and then I was like, oh shit, it's going to be not guilty. But he was unbelievably thorough. So, the chances. I mean, this asshole will appeal for sure, but the chances of good grounds to appeal, I reckon, will have been significantly reduced because of how thorough the judgment was. Hey, BR the Star. Yeah, it's fucking awesome. No, they haven't found her body. I don't think they ever will. I still think it's at the property, but, they've dug and everything. I mean, he might have limed her. He might have used the old, because quite a lot of years had passed before they did the dig. But the Teacher's Pet podcast, it became popular around the world. Like, people I remember talking about Chris Dawson before, and subscribers in other countries were aware of the podcast. But a lot of you already know that my main fascination with law at the moment, and has been for about a decade, is how social media can impact trials. And the judge was very scathing of the podcast. The Australian had already taken the podcast down because they didn't want it to influence the trial. I don't know if they were forced to or they volunteered to do that. But he said that the podcast was very biased and basically prevented Chris Dawson from getting a fair trial with a jury, which is pretty accurate. I don't think it was biased. I think it brought attention to a cold case, and ultimately it led to Dawson's arrest and charge and now conviction. So, well done, Hedley Thomas. I hope he's drunk as a skunk right now. I hope when that handed down. But God, it's a good judgment. But it's just interesting because there's not a lot of Australian case law yet that has really set any precedents about how social media is impacting criminal and civil trials. So, it might be the first judgment that talks about podcasts in particular. So it's pretty exciting. Yeah, 40 years. Because I think Hedley's podcast was about 4 years. I think it was 36 years when the podcast, for some reason I've got 36 stuck in my head. So yeah, I reckon Teacher's Pet was probably 4 years ago, and 40 years. But the judgment's so good, especially right before he hands down the verdict, because he has methodically gone through everything. It's like join the dots, his judgment. And he pretty much ends by saying it's up to the Crown to prove that there's no other scenario possible. Like, what they're putting to the court is the only likely true version of events. And so he joined all the dots and then pretty much said, there's nothing else that's been put before me that provides a better alternative, or didn't say better alternative, but pretty much, yeah, the Crown on this completely circumstantial case have succeeded in showing that there is absolutely no other conclusion that you can draw from it that except that Chris Dawson murdered her. And the judgment was terrifying in parts because he discounted all of the allegations of domestic violence, and he discounted a lot of witnesses because he said they were opinions, not facts. But the things that really got it over the line, which was brilliant, was that he found that she was dead and had died on or around 8th of January 1982. The second thing was she did not leave that house voluntarily. Coming up on the left is Biscuit's mural, everyone. Make sure you wave to little Biscuit up on that. Just on the left-hand side, that very colourful mural is my cat, Biscuit. Hey, beautiful. So spring is in my step. I'm going to Kmart, not to celebrate the guilty verdict, but just I've got some things I need to get. I totally love the House of K. Yeah, that she hadn't voluntarily left because nothing made sense. Like, why would she have left without her belongings? Like, why didn't she pack even clean underwear? Why did she leave her contacts at home? When he handed over her belongings to the cops, it included her contacts. Like, major mistake. Same with Chris Watts. Like, get rid of the bag, you know? And so it looks like it went with them, dumbasses. But anyway, thank God dumb criminals get caught. Yep, moving in the teen. And I mean, Joanne Curtis didn't deserve what he inflicted on her either, even though they were married. He'd groomed her. And now that they've got the guilty verdict for murder, don't be surprised if there are going to be a lot of SAR charges for grooming underage girls, because Joanne wasn't the only one. It was purely because he was infatuated with her, like the judge said, but because she was from a very broken home and she ended moving in with them, she was the prime grooming target, but she wasn't the only one. Oh, I don't know the Alison Barclay one. And Alison Barclay. But Alison Baden-Clay, Gerard's a fuckwit. That's why I thought Chris Watts was guilty the first time I saw that interview on the porch, because I instantly went to, that's Gerard Baden-Clay, part 2. Is that how you met Mel? No, well, she's not the only one, because in Teacher's Pet, quite a few former students came forward with their own stories. So he's not going to get a light sentence. He's never going to be released from jail. He's going to die in jail, which is fabulous. See ya, Chris Dawson, you piece of shit. Finally, justice for Lynette and their kids. Finally. So never give up. There is always hope. And I credit Hedley Thomas and the Australian for bringing that case back into the public arena. And the judgment, 5.5 hours, it was so thorough. And yeah, initially the clips that I was watching, I thought, oh shit, I started off going, oh my God, this is going to be a guilty verdict. And then I went, oh, it's starting to sound like it may be not guilty. And then it went back to maybe, but I wasn't convinced. But the second he said guilty, oh my God, there was much rejoicing. Oh yeah, Baden Clark, yeah. I mean, he was the ultimate moron. I even told Armchair Detective when I was on his panel, braless and makeup-less at fuck knows what time it was in the morning. And he asked me what got me into the Chris Watts case. And I said, well, there's an Australian convicted murderer who gave a very similar interview on a porch. Very similar. The only difference was Baden Clay had scratches all over him. Alison fought for her life. But that was what made me, like, instantly go, this Chris Watts dude. I've seen your type before. You've done it. But I really just wanted to go live to celebrate the guilty verdict, and I know that there are some subscribers who did get into Teacher's Pet because it was such a good podcast, and there were a lot of very big American true crime podcasters who were recommending it, like My Favorite Murder. I specifically recall them recommending it, but there were others that I used to listen to as well. Like there were quite a few different podcasters in the States who raved about Teacher's Pet. It was such a good podcast. And now we've got a bit of a, well, not a precedent really, but an acknowledgement, I would put it, from a judge about how podcasts can impact the right to a fair trial and also diminish the likelihood of a jury trial. So that's really interesting too. Like, it's not just you fucking beauty, that asshole's finally where he belongs and she's finally, justice has been served for Lynette. Lynette too. Yeah, cut myself shaving and got bitten by a caterpillar. Fucking idiot. The scratch marks on his chest, he reckons, were an allergic reaction to a caterpillar. God, he was a prick. I mean, look, anyone who can kill someone's a prick, but a husband who murders his wife and deprives his 3 daughters of a mother, or, you know, aka Chris Watts, deprives his daughters and son of a mother. That's why I'm so into family annihilators. Not into them in a positive way. I think they're the worst thing in the world. But just to have that mentality to be capable of doing something so brutal. But not only, you know, destroying their world, actually taking the lives of their, I mean, the family annihilators take out the kids as well, but people like Baden Clay who leave the children alive, those little girls lost their mother and their father. Oh, his sister was a piece of work, exactly. Remember the accident? I'm okay, just a little bit hurt. Oh, the accident, I know. I think he was trying to get extra wounds to cover up all the other ones. The psychology, I know, and just the stupidity behind it too. What a fucking loser he was. He and Chris Watts, cut from the same cloth. And now this jerk, who also deprived his daughters of a mother and then married their babysitter, who he also had a child with. But she was one of the key witnesses for the Crown, Joanne Curtis. That poor girl, I mean, look, Lynette's the major victim in this. Obviously, she lost her life. But Joanne Curtis and all the other high school students that he groomed and abused. Oh, Gerard's repugnant. Yeah, they do have a child. I think it's another girl. I think it's another daughter. But she didn't deserve what happened to her either, and the fact that she was a key witness for the Crown shows how little she cares about that piece of work. But I was just very excited to go live because I do know, hopefully, some of my subs as well from overseas who followed the Teacher's Pet podcast will just check in and see what's happened. It's a really quick live. I might go live again after I've done my Kmart shopping because it's a pretty big day. And all these people around the world who have family members who they believe were murdered and they've never found their bodies and so on, just don't give up hope. And I'm so glad that Hedley Thomas and the Australian newspaper brought this case back into the public arena because justice has been served. Chris Dawson reminded you of a teacher your sister had who ended up being a pervert. Yeah, and isn't it weird because he's got the twin brother and they look alike, but very different energy coming off each of them. Although I do think the twin brother helped cover it all up and support his brother publicly and stuff. But there's very different energy that comes off both of them. Well, I detect it. But it might also be because I've believed he was guilty from the first episode of Teacher's Pet. But I'm pretty excited that the judge went into a lot of detail about the impact of the podcast and the fact that we're now getting case law in this area, which I'm so fascinated by, is a bit exciting. You just pulled a massive long hair from under your chin. Nice. Thank fuck you found it. Why didn't anyone tell you though? I bet if someone's been looking at it for weeks and just like, fuck, Mel's got a really long hair. And they didn't tell you? Oh well. Well. I said to my sister, if I ever end up in hospital, can you come in and pluck my chin hairs? And she's like, no, I'll be too busy. I'll let you grow a moustache and a beard. I'm like, sibling love. Is there anything nicer or sweeter? Where did it come from? Your chin and hormones, probably. I had this really long, fine, I mean, when I say long, it was like 3 centimeters, 2 centimeters, really long, not long, but fine blonde hair growing out of my shoulder that I was sitting outside with my ex and I spotted it and pulled it out. And he was like, was that attached to you? And I was like, yeah. And he went, oh, gross. And I'm like, well, I didn't want it. And there were way gross things on his body than mine. He was 25 years older than me. So, I could have let rip. Yeah, and the fact that the verdict was live too was interesting. But anyone who did follow Teacher's Pet or anyone in Australia who knows the terribly sad case of Lynette Dawson, who did not deserve to die, nor did Joanne Curtis, who was groomed by this prick who murdered his wife so he could be with this basically child. She didn't deserve it either, or any of the other of the girls that he groomed and potentially had assaulted. But there will probably be some sexual assault type charges coming, I would imagine. And I did cover this a long time ago. So it's like back when I first was bouncing around on YouTube, this was the hot topic in Australia. Everyone was listening to Teacher's Pet. So, yeah, a happy day. It's amazing how a guilty verdict can make people break out into little dances, but that's what happened at work. Yeah, I don't know. I hope his daughters. Isn't it weird how sometimes those creeps don't? But who knows? I don't know anything about that, like whether that happened to them or not. But if it did, ugh. I mean, he's a revolting piece of shit anyway. I hope that didn't happen to them. It just makes it like a million times worse. Ugh. Ugh. But he's been locked away. I was in there too, Mel. I think we've talked about this before because I was a verified lawyer. I still am in web sleuths. I mean, I haven't been on that forum for years. But back in the day, that was the only place you could really go for true crime. And then things like Hedley Thomas's podcast started happening, and now YouTube channels are doing things. But I think we've talked before about how we possibly had chatted in web sleuths. I mean, I even followed Gable Tosti on the web sleuth forums. So, you know, there's things that have happened in more recent times that I did. But yeah, I haven't. I did actually go back in there. I did read the Chris Watts forum. But I reckon I went back there last year to look at a case and see what was going on. I can't remember which one it was. Oh, yeah, and also, yeah, the Big Brother with my cult following on my thread about Jessica only having one brain cell. Our stars were trying to align. It took YouTube for it to finally, the collision to occur. But Groovers, I may log off. I'm going to go into the House of K. I've just got some things I want to grab, and then I'm going to head home. But I might go live, although it'll be getting dark. It won't be a very interesting drive, but if you guys are up for it, I'll come back on in about half an hour and you can keep me company while I tootle home. But I'm just so excited about this verdict and the judgment. Like, I was going to say read it, don't watch it, because 5.5 hours, it was so thorough. I'd be very curious if an appeal is lodged to see what sort of grounds they come up with, because this judge crossed every T and dotted every I. Hey, Scout. Hey, just before I log off, are you one of the subscribers that followed the podcast Teacher's Pet? It was an Australian podcast about 4 years ago that talked about a guy called Chris Dawson. His wife, Lynette, went missing in 1982, and this Chris Dawson guy ended up marrying his babysitter that he'd been grooming and having an affair with while Lynette was still married. Check you're on live chat, Mel, not talk chat. I know some of my subscribers in other countries got into the podcast called Teacher's Pet. But anyway, I'm not sure if you were one. I had a feeling you might have been. But today, Chris Dawson, after a 5.5-hour judgment, because he was tried by judge alone because the podcast was deemed to be biased and precluded him from getting a fair jury trial. It wasn't you, okay. But he was found guilty, and everyone's very excited because this podcast pretty much brought the case back out of the freezer. It was a very cold case. The podcast led to him being arrested and charged with her murder, and this trial's been going for like 2 months. And we don't televise our trials, but the judgment today was televised. Yeah, Scout Inquirer. Chris Dawson, and the judgment, 5.5 hours, and I went from, oh my God, it's going to be guilty to not guilty to guilty. I obviously didn't watch the full 5.5 hours, but there were little snippets of it. Scout, can you see Mel? Totally Mel? Once we've sorted this out, I'm going to go, because I'll go live again in about half an hour. I just have a few things I got to get. I've got a friend overseas who loves the House of K. You can't see Totally Mel. Well, you two have got to work out what's going on. One of you's blocked the other one. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, Scout. I had the same thought. Scout's over on the Smooth Criminal channel. I'm on both channels because I'm trying to get my true crime channel cranking again. I don't follow or know the case. Tor, your favourite is here. Sorry, I've been busy. Nice to see you, Tony. I'm actually about to log off, but I'm going to go live again in about half an hour. Yeah, see, I see chat from both channels, but it doesn't tell me which channel people are on. Aha! Tricky! That's me trying to get some action happening over on Smooth Criminal, because eventually I'll do all my true crime on there. Just like eventually all my cooking will be on Shitty Kitty. Oh, that reminds me, I'm just going to check my shopping list and see if I need to get any provisions for dinner tonight. But Grievers, I'm going to go. I'll go and do my quick little shop. I've just got a few things I've got to grab, like I said, and then I will be live again in about half an hour. Tiny, stop it. And no, I'm not buying shoes. I will see you all again very soon. And until then, stay groovy, everyone. And you little fucking beauty. You know the best thing about him being found guilty? That smug, entitled, stuck up. He was an NRL player. Like, he had quite a high profile in our sporting community. He got carted off in handcuffs. See you, Chris Dawson. Rotten hell. I'll be back in half an hour. Keep the party going, Grievers. And until then, stay groovy, everyone.